has confused because the company, they didn't do any consultation in our communities. No involvement, no involvement, no consultations. We find a solution that we must meet with the group of lawyers to discuss about what we're going forward to take this to court, to interdict them, where we've got a solution. We work together with the lawyers and from the Natural Justice Legal Resource Center, as well as with mineral scientists, academics, researchers, and NGOs to develop our argument against the seismic survey. Fortunately, we had already begun to develop our working relationship with some of this organization and university researchers who support small-scale fishers in our struggle for our rights. We discuss with lawyers and researchers how to survive will impact how the survey will impact the species in that way, as small-scale catch, the harvest, and scientists came in their expecting evidence and opinions to also add weight to our arguments. In our court paper, we use this argument. There was no adequate consultation with us. The small-scale fishers are coastal community, and we were not involved in the process. Shell has not considered the impact on the marine environment and the latest scientific evidence. Shell has no consider how this will impact our human rights, our livelihoods, our food security, and our customary and cultural rights, include our spirituality. At the same as activities, we decide to need to mobilize masses to challenge decisions that can be taken by the government, especially our Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy and Minister of Fisheries and Environment, without doing a proper consultation of the affected people. Together with many other civil society groups and social movement, we held many protest meetings where we talked on the radios and television. And one day we demonstrated all along the beaches of the whole country. And we raise awareness of many people about the impact of oil and gas exploration on climate change and also on the livelihood as fishers. It is our victory in Makhanda High Court. On the 1st September, the Makhanda High Court set aside the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy decision to grant exploration right to Shell company Impact Africa along the World Coast. what was very important that the judgment highlighted, our right as small-scale fishers, and said that Shell had not provided sufficient evidence that it could protect our food security and livelihood. Also, that they had not addressed the impact on the climate change. This was a huge victory for us, and we realized that by working with a team of lawyers, researchers, academics, and civil society organizations, we could combine our strength. We have now built good working relationship with the different organizations, and this helps us. This helps us now as we still facing this threat of ocean grabbing and mining. So we are trying to build this network of ocean defenders. We need environmental justice now. Hashtag protect our livelihood. Hashtag save our marine life. Hashtag fishers lives matter. Hashtag climate justice. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sindiso. Now I'd like to welcome Taryn Pereira from the Coastal Justice Network.
Thank you, Jackie. I don't know if there's a question for Sindiso.
I think let's keep moving,
okay,
and then we'll take
sure.
some questions at the end, if that's okay.
Of course.
Are we on track IT-wise?
Not at all. Oh, I see. That's great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, Jackie, and welcome everybody who's online. And it's really a great pleasure to be with all of you today and to be part of this very amazing panel of comrades and colleagues from around the coast. My name's Taryn Pereira. I'm based at the University in Makanda in the Eastern Cape. And how do we change slides?
Press forward.
Oh, okay. I am part of the One Ocean Hub, and within the One Ocean Hub, we have a formation of researchers working very closely with small-scale fishers, and we have called ourselves for now the Coastal Justice Network. It's an informal collection of like-minded researchers who are really guided by the question, how can our research be in solidarity with the movements of small-scale fishers and other coastal communities? And the picture that has been painted of the way in which the blue economy in South Africa is actually experienced by small-scale fishers and coastal people, we have framed as, and through really accompanying and witnessing what is happening and what is being experienced by small-scale fishers, and seeing that these are threats to coastal justice, many of which come through the sort of way in which the blue economy and other ocean governance instruments are actually implemented into communities. So this range of injustices, which are social, environmental, economic, include things like human rights violations in marine protected areas where the livelihoods of small-scale fishers are criminalized, this expansion of offshore oil and gas, which has really been speeded up and pushed over the last 5 years, and particularly through COVID, where all of the consultations and public processes to comment on such developments all moved online and seem to come at small-scale fishers, at communities, and at us at such a dizzying rate that it was not possible to keep up sometimes. A real lack of meaningful participation and inclusion in marine governance, failures of our progressive small-scale fisheries policy, the sort of daily social and environmental injustices that people living in remote coastal communities face, such as water shortages, water crises, and a lot of these things really came to a head and have been coming to a head, particularly in the Eastern Cape where I live, where many coastal communities go for months and even years without water. This formation really emerged strongly during COVID because of the extreme COVID lockdown-related oppressions that small-scale fishers faced. The coastal mining expansion, which Merle and Fabian are going to speak more about, and the ways in which small-scale fishers' rights, even when their rights are actually realized, are actively blocked and exploited by commercial fishing associations and others with power. This coastal justice network, or this network of researchers, civil society organizations, and small-scale fisher leaders, is one expression of something that emerges and works alongside long-standing relationships between researchers, small-scale fishers, lawyers, and other organizations. This is one collective that seeks to contribute to, 30 years and more of work to realize justice for small-scale fishers. And what we're really interested in is what does transdisciplinary research look like if it's really based on solidarity and an explicit commitment to social and environmental justice? So with that as the question guiding us, we take our lead from what small-scale fishers are experiencing and identifying as needing to be responded to. We've looked at which are the organizations working on coastal justice issues, and we've thought a lot about how to build solidarity across organizations which are relevant to the activities of small-scale fishers in the country, between different researchers working in the ocean space, and between academics and social movements. What are the elements of those relationships, and how can we build greater solidarity, understanding, reciprocal relationship across them? And as you can imagine, what this actually involves is a lot of tensions between difference in power, difference in paradigms and understanding of what the problem is and what makes the world the way it is, difference in politics of different groups, and navigating a lot of tensions and divisions within and between those different groups. So into this space where there's a collective of researchers wishing to make sure that our research and our work is useful to small-scale fisher movements, come the seismic surveys, ushering in oil and gas, bringing all of these companies in their wake as they were applying to blast all around the coastline, searching for oil and gas. And as we've heard from Sindiso and from Christian, in the Eastern Cape and around the coastline was a resounding no coming from small-scale fishers, a resounding outrage that there were going to be large multinational companies exploring and blasting for oil and gas just at the time that small-scale fishers in the Eastern Cape finally received their rights. Many of these cooperatives received their rights in 2019 and 2020. Hasn't meant much yet, but as they received their rights, government was also giving the green light to companies exploring for oil and gas right in their waters, in the places where they had been told they would get preferential access for their fishing, for their livelihoods. So these are some of the fishers of the Eastern Cape expressing their resistance. At the same time, our minister, this is our minister, Gwede Mantashe, Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, tried to paint the resistance to seismic surveys and oil and gas as being colonialism and apartheid of a special type, in which he tried to frame resistance to this as being a privileged few environmentalists who were trying to keep the Eastern Cape poor and trying to block development and so on. And this outraged the small-scale fishers even more because once again, their actual voice and resistance was being undermined and marginalized, and they were being, in a way, told that they were pawns, whereas they were the leaders of this resistance. Sorry, Jackie. Just as a message for, I'm not sure who in this room is working as a researcher or working in sort of the academic space, but what I learned so much was that in this Wild Coast Shell case court judgment, these different kinds of knowledges were the thing that really was the strength of this case, and it was picked up by the judges, the different kinds of knowledges coming together. There had to be knowledge of the justice system. So as researchers, we had to take guidance from our legal colleagues. How can my research field contribute to furthering justice in this case? There had to be the customary practice and knowledge, the cultural and heritage knowledge and practices of the ocean, which small-scale fishers know intergenerationally and which they practice. There had to be knowledge of fisheries and marine biodiversity, and there was a combination of local indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge about this that came together, climate change science, knowledge of what the government's positions and strategies were, and of what the law said about consultation. And these things coming together were really, really strong. And the science on its own, I know, Kristen, you said we want scientists to come in. Actually, because it's such an unknown still, the oil and gas companies will get scientists and our side will get scientists and they'll disagree with each other. But when we accept that's an unknown, but we say, look at all of the customary knowledge that is saying we do not want this, and it threatens us and it threatens the spirituality, that's enough. So I've got 1 minute left. I just want to highlight some of the values that are guiding this kind of solidarity-based research. Things like accessibility. So can your research be used and understood, really used by all who contribute to it? Reflexivity, so that's a critical awareness of our own practices and blind spots and power. Relevance, our research should always be useful and usable for the social justice efforts of social movements. There should be transparency, carefulness, respectfulness, reciprocity, and transformativity. How is this research transforming power and transgressing business as usual? Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Taryn. It's so hard to rush people because I think all of these presentations are so full and rich. But now we'd really like to welcome Jerry, who brings a very important perspective, which we don't always think about and isn't always talked about in the blue economy, but how conservation is also squeezing small-scale fishers. And as the oil and gas mining is increasing, many of the conservationists and policymakers are pushing for more EPAs because they think EPA is going to protect us from the oil and gas. Jerry, over to you. Thank you.
Sorry. When I
Shall I just push hard?
Yeah.
Shall I do?
Yeah. Good afternoon. This is in the circle, red circle. This is where I come from, Coast Bay. It's the province which is next to the border of Mozambique. The area where I come from, Coast Bay. The exact place where I come from is adjacent to South Africa's first UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the oldest conservation areas in Africa. The slides continues to explain the population sizes and the ecosystems which are found there. Interestingly, for your knowledge, the 4 lakes are the lakes where I grew up doing all a number of fishing types, which is Mpungwini, Makaulani, Siala, and Amanza Mnyama. which are now all, I will give you the background later on, where they are falling now. The area, as you can see, the people who are living there has been practicing what is called fish trap. And it is a method of fishing which has been practiced for generations. We believe it's way beyond 500 to 700 years. Ownership goes from father to son, but that requires now to be confirmed, because there are a number of changes which happened in the area, lots of influx of people coming from other places, and yeah. These are the slide shows the fish trap and how they are built. Obviously, the question or the issue of sustainability of fish can be displayed by the spacings in between when these fish traps are woven, for the obvious reasons that it enables the small fish to pass through and only the bigger ones, which is quite interesting because, as I've mentioned, that this has been happening for centuries, meaning that before the scientists and the researchers arrived, our grandfathers had in their minds the understanding that for them to survive and their fish, there must be means and ways of managing for sustainability. That slide that I've just, for your information, again, the family of Umgomezulu and the family of Umkhonto are the two families who were living adjacent to each other, and our fish crawls were the Umgomezulu, which is my clan. We were the first from the estuary, just after Uguma, the coral reefs. The first fish crawls belong to our family, and the second and the third belong to Mkhonto. The gentleman whom you saw in the slide, standing, is still alive, and fortunately, I didn't even have to ask his permission that I will be displaying him, because I am their advisor and coordinator to the committee which is working on the land claim. The historical context of the area: during the colonial era, there was an appropriation of land and natural resources from local communities, which definitely created huge conflict. And during apartheid time, there were forced removals and dispossession. For your information, sad to say, I was working within the very same organization which removed the people from my own area. Why I was working for them? The family and myself, we agreed that I will have to study nature conservation, because it was like what the government through conservation bodies were bringing in the area was like our communities required that they have a person who can have that skill or knowledge, Western knowledge, because they had the cultural and traditional indigenous knowledge of conserving their area, but we were looked down after. So, and then my family sent me to go and study that animal, which successfully I managed, and I got the job back at home. But because it was during apartheid era, all my efforts, to try and amicably tell them that this is how we were surviving. And if you are bringing Western means, ways of conserving nature, please consider the indigenous knowledge. But unfortunately, all that fell into the deaf ears. The area ended up being closed in and fenced. It was unfortunate, a painful experience, because when you were fencing the area, during that time, there was no planning for settlement. Where are they going to take the people? Even the means of taking the people to that new area, so people had to fend for themselves. Worst of all, families with old people and children, they were not taken care of. People just simply were evicted. And you have to fend for yourself or you're going to live. Schools, churches, fishing trawl area, you mentioned grazing land for cattle, homesteads, all were fenced in. It was a painful experience, if I remember all what happened. Post-apartheid era in 1995, the area fell under the World Heritage Site. That definitely was a very serious blow to the people, because we were not engaged. We don't even know, even today, who actually signed those agreements to take our land and put it to the World Heritage Site. The agency which is looking after the area is Mangaliso. Their plan is to get the area that is this time rewilded, meaning that they want the area to go back to its former natural position, which to us is an insult. We were living there. Why are they doing that? The area was fenced first, but the fence was taken down by the current generation. As I've mentioned, that poor consultation, they prioritize conservation, environment over human beings. The questioning of our fish traps by scientists using Western science, poor consideration of indigenous yeah, well, I'll talk of it.
Yes.
That's the point where I first mentioned that scientists, research work that has been done seemingly had some in our small way of understanding the scientific science researchers' work, that you are putting, or you are putting your hypothesis, and in our own way of thinking as community people on the ground. When you arrive, we look at you and we think you are coming to help us, but we don't know the agenda of the people who actually granted you the permission to come and research in our area. The previous scientists and researchers who came and researched in the area, which are this entire place can be filled with the research work about our area, didn't yield anything tangible that can help our community. Why? The answer is right there with the establishment of the Isimangaliso Wetland Park, meaning that the researchers had the agenda of going there to study the frogs, to study certain birds, which all those are termed to be endangered or very special bird, which needs to be taken care of over and above human beings. That's how and where now the area is sitting in the very even puzzling name is Mangali, so we don't know that name. We lived here, there, but they coined the word Mangaliso Wetland Park. But it is not all the scientists and the researchers who have that negative attitude towards the community. I'm happy for the first time in my life fighting for my community. I had the university guys who consulted me. I think this is now the second year that I've been communicating with these guys to come and voice what I'm saying, which is not actually me. I'm talking on behalf of very worried people there. But these guys seemingly, to me, they are now looking at the injustices which has been created, and the legal team as well are there assisting. And I wish that it's not the only time today and for this Congress that you assist the people of Ikosi Bay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerry, and I really hope that in the coming year we'll have many more opportunities to hear more of the history and the stories that you and your community have to tell, because it's really a very neglected area in South Africa, and there are so many injustices continuing. So thank you very much, Jerry, for sharing that. You know, it's very painful for you to remember and to share that with you. moving to the other side of the coast and welcome Merle and Fabian to share with us now, again, this big squeeze that's happening, coming from a different sector, ironically, a sector that falls through the net. It's not even in the Ocean Economy Master Plan. It's a slippery sector, coastal mining. It's in that liminal zone, sort of in the middle, isn't it? You're going to tell us more about those impacts. Thank you. Certainly in the middle there when you move. Okay.
Well, hello, everybody. And yeah, it's wonderful to be on this panel with this group of people. I'm sure you're a little bit tired of all this talking at you. So I'm going to try and be as quick as I can, which is very difficult because I feel very passionate about this topic. But I'm going to just set the scene, where we are, what some of the issues are. And then Fabian from the Doringbai community is going to really tell us about how mining is impacting on food and livelihoods of small-scale fishers in that area. So, hard, okay. So look, mining has been part of the South African economy for generations. It's got a very bad track record, as we know. But nonetheless, it is part of the economy. And what we've noticed is that there's increasing pressure on the coastal environment for all different kinds of mining, in particular heavy mineral sands, diamonds, and phosphate. And what's happening is we're just getting overwhelmed by applications for prospecting and mining along the West Coast. And this has really increased over the last few years. So where is this happening? Well, the applications are for mining on beaches, mining on dunes, mining on coastal land, mining in the surf zone, and mining in marine waters. So what we're noticing on the West Coast, which has really made our research group together with communities that we work with on the Western Cape kind of really decide we need to tackle this, is this rapid increase in mining for the last sort of 3 to 5 years or 2 to 3 years, as I've said here. And this is largely due to the increased demand for these heavy mineral sands, which have become more and more in demand, the so-called rutile rush. And as I said, there are numerous ad hoc applications coming through, but there's no central database to try and get a handle on, what are the applications, what is their status, where are they, what are the rights that have been allocated and for how long. And what we found as we began looking at this was that even government doesn't have a big picture of what's going on. So you can't actually go to DMRE and say, could you tell us about this particular mining application? Either they don't know or they don't want to tell you. So our research team, which is part of this One Ocean Hub project at UCT, we started doing a monitoring and mapping process of all the applications for mining on the West Coast. Now, the map you're seeing there also contains some of the oil and gas applications that we've mapped. But what we're focusing on in this particular session is on the mining. As you can see, that sort of coastal strip. And where you see that sort of dark red, that's where mining is currently taking place, whereas the sort of slightly pinky red is where there are prospecting either applications or operations underway. So if you look at that map, basically from the Orange River, which is our border with Namibia, all the way down to just below an area known as Lambert's Bay, and of course it could go further south, we've basically got wall-to-wall coastal mining. And of course, this is of extreme concern to many coastal communities who basically rely on these resources for food and livelihoods. And of course, as we've heard from our panel so far, just such an important part of their cultural identity. So basically, the West Coast relies on natural resources for its economics, for its economic life. Fishing, agriculture, tourism, and to some extent conservation are key kind of sectors. And that's really just to give you a snapshot of some of the areas and the people who are involved in using this coastal area, from fishers to recreational people. And in the top right-hand corner, you see that slide of the Olifants estuary, which is the third most important estuary in South Africa in terms of its rich wetlands. And also critically important from the people of Papendorp and Ebenezer who fish in those waters. Now I'm going to hone down onto our case study, which is in Doring Bay. It's basically just north of Doring Bay. And in May this year, we in fact sort of April, May, the community alerted people to the fact that mining had commenced on one of the beaches just north of Doring Bay. So Doring Bay is a fishing town, and that's where Fabian lives, and Fabian's going to tell us a little bit more about that. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the procedural issues. So first of all, this particular company applied for a mining renewal right. This was issued. And as we began to investigate what was going on, we found out that no environmental authorization had been granted and no full environmental impact assessment had been done as required by our National Environmental Management Act's environmental impact assessment regulations, but they were relying on an old environmental management plan from 2005. So this was the environmental information that was supposedly guiding the actual mining operation on this particular stretch of beach. Of course, this information is out of date. We've learned so much more about the biodiversity importance of this area. We've also learned about the fishing. We've learned about communities. And critically important, communities in that area were not consulted. So basically, they just saw this devastation occurring on their beach. Now, I'm not going to get into the details because I know we're running out of time. But if you look on the right-hand side, you will see this is what is known as concession 13A. So that's that very dark blue area, and then some of that sort of land-based purpley and dark blue area. That's known as concession 13A. And this is where the mining is occurring. And the actual mining that started is occurring on that sort of little red cross that you might see in the southern part of the slide. But this concession area stretches for 13 kilometers of coast and goes all the way almost to the Olifants estuary, this very important estuary. I'm going to just move on. But in fact, there are two other concession areas. So that was 13A. There's also 12A and 11A, which cover in total, all three cover an area of nearly 80 kilometers of coastline. So this is basically an area that stretches 1 kilometer seawards of the high water line. It includes the surf zone because it's a mining right that's got a bundle of rights included. So the surf zone, the beaches, and some of what is known as the Admiralty zone. So that's the kind of land side of the high water line. And basically, what we're seeing happening is that contractors are starting to get permission from the overarching company to mine on these beaches. Of course, from an environmental point of view, there are several concerns in terms of impacts on the fisheries, on biodiversity, on, for example, the potential for smothering important, the important rock lobster habitat, which is a critical food source for communities. It's an important area for the spawning of various pelagic resources, which again are very important for food and livelihoods. And there are a number of other impacts which I'm not going to discuss, perhaps except to pull out the one about public access. And the reason I do this is we're basically talking about 80 kilometers of coastline, which is potentially subjected to this diamond mining on beaches, in the sea, and on land. And in addition to that, there is a large stretch of that coastline which already has heavy mineral sand rights. So you've got two different mining activities going on. And we have a piece of legislation, the Integrated Coastal Management Act, which has as a main goal enhancing access to the coast for the people of South Africa. And this is an example of how an 80-kilometer stretch of coast is potentially going to be shut off or restricted for enjoyment, for fishing, and for livelihoods. And of course, one of the concerns we have about documents such as the Environmental Management Program is you've got these many different contractors working here, and to what extent are they really complying with the environmental requirements of these documents? Because the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is responsible for monitoring what mining companies are doing. So some of our major concerns then regarding the Durban is that mining is that there's been no environmental authorization, there's been no consultation with fishing communities, and there's no transparency about the environmental assessment and the decision-making processes. We cannot get information out of the private companies just to get confirmation as to whether the renewal rights in, for example, the other concession areas have been granted or not. And the companies as well don't respond to NGOs. They only seem to respond sometimes to a legal letter. The other concern is that these mining rights have been issued for a further 30 years based on this historic information from prior 2005. And the concern is that all these mining applications are being considered on this ad hoc basis. So there's no overarching framework, environmental framework, social framework to guide. If we're going to have mining, there might be areas where it is suitable, but we have no framework to guide where mining should and should not take place. And there's been no assessment to date of the cumulative impacts of all this different mining activity taking place on our West Coast. So we're talking about heavy mineral sand mining, we're talking about phosphate mining, we're talking about diamond mining in the sea and on land. So we don't really have an understanding of what the impact has already been, let alone how those impacts integrate and what is the relationship between those impacts and the other impacts associated with other development activities like mariculture development, like tourism, and so on. 1 minute left, so let's move to the final slide then. So what is clear is that environmental impacts have not been properly assessed, communities have not been consulted, and information is hard to access. And I've already mentioned these points about lack of transparency and ad hoc approach. And I think the critical thing is that civil society and ourselves as researchers, we are completely overwhelmed with the number of applications and the amount of reports and documents that we have to read to get on top of what's happening. And this is happening in the absence of any kind of strategic environmental oversight. And so very often, communities are having to resort to legal action to basically defend their coast. And I think just the final point then is I think one of the reasons we've been able to kind of pivot and kind of respond to these crises when there is this kind of mining that needs to be challenged or unjust decisions that need to be challenged is that over time we have developed these good partnerships between communities, NGOs, researchers, and our legal experts. So I'd just like to leave it there and hand over to Fabian.
Thank you very much, Merle. Fabian, you're going to give us a little bit more insight into how this is affecting you and your fellow fishers and residents.
Okay, thank you very much. Good day, everybody. Good day, everyone. I'm Fabian Mohammed, a small-scale fisher from the fishing village called Doringbaai. I've been a fisher for years, and that is also part of our tradition. In Doringbaai, as a community, we are fishers. Fishing was for all the years. It was our livelihood, it was our heritage, and it is our future for our generations to come. Now, at the present moment, our stories has been told for us, and not by the fishers on grassroots level by themselves. The challenges we face has never been told. What we experience as fishers, as small-scale fishers in the fishing industry, has never been told. But today, I thank you all for that platform that's been created to listen to the fisher and their story on grassroots level. First, I want to start with this mining. This mining in Doringbaai has been improved, like Merle stated before, the history regarding the application. But we as the fishers was never been acknowledged in the process, in the whole process of that mining or the application or public participation, nothing. We did start by asking questions and said, fishers, listen, our livelihood is a threat. Due to the fact that the mining company is now working in our area where our livelihood is, where we depend on fishing, where we working, been there for years. Now we are facing the threat of mining, which totally disrupt our income to generate an income. They disrupt our ecosystem. They've been destroyed, our environment. And we are the fishers, are the persons affected in the whole process. And we start asking questions. What is going on? Because now, previously, before the mining start, we could live a living with the resources. We was having access to food security. But now, when we enter there, there's a notification that said mining area in the area is being restricted. So we as the fishers in the community are now not allowed to enter there. And that it becomes a problem of conflict to us. We ask the mining people, we don't know who you are. You have to come, and there's no way that you even get your social responsibility towards our community. We only see you are working, we only see there's mining, but the fishers on grassroots level, they don't benefit. Like in nothing. Fishers was asking, can we collaborate with mining company? Can we coexist as fishers, additional indigenous fishers with mining company? As you all see by yourself, it can't work. Or it has to be mining, or it has to be fishing. But fishing and mining can't work together. And we as the fishers already experienced it. We are not against any development. Once it concerns development to improve our livelihoods in our communities, then we are not against development. But what we experience from this, we are against the injustice towards our fishing communities in our fishing villages around the coastline. The sea, the ocean there, we used to be there for years. Like I said, we actually having an ancestral connection there. We used to go there. Yes, our forefathers used to go there for generations. But now we can't. We can't. That is totally enormous disruption of our whole existence as future fishers. I don't know what about DMR in the permits, but that is not the only mining. That is not the only mining that Doornbay is facing. There is applications for more than 7 different mining companies that apply for mining oil and gas permits in Doornbay. If this is only one mine, in the other mine, oil and gas start there, all the other mines, is mineral mines, it's sand mining, it's beach mining, you can name it, all the mines, different Australian companies, different mining companies. Is all of them start working. What do we all see? Where did we see ourselves as fishers in the future? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fabian. I think you can almost hear the noise from that mine, and you can feel it squeezing the life out of Doornbay and the fishers. I mean, as you've heard from all of our panelists, small-scale fishers are facing a crisis in South Africa. It's not something that we can sit and discuss with bankers and whoever. You know, how can we be more innovative in this space? What solutions shall we seek? We have to hear this voice of the fishers that is really saying we are facing a crisis. And I think it's particularly relevant, Fabian, that you mentioned this question: can fisheries coexist with oil and gas? Because in the latest plan of the Ocean Economy Master Plan in South Africa, that we happened to see by chance on Thursday, that the small-scale fishers still haven't seen. In the implementation plan, it says there coexistence of fisheries and all other economic activities in the ocean. That is the vision. And I think we've come full circle to where Christian then started this panel, that we know that in terms of the power relations in our ocean space, not all economic activities are considered equal. So thank you very much. Let's give the panel a big round of applause. I would now like to invite our two panelists, Wilmeen, discussants, I beg your pardon, sorry. Thanks, Wilmeen. Our two discussants, Wilmeen and Pelile, if you'd perhaps like to come up here, or would you like to speak?
I think everybody's very tight, so I'm just going to very quickly say two things that stood out for me from what people said. Or the one is that we heard about these cases, Shell and Searcher and Doringby, and in all these cases they needed quick action, and people talked about the teamwork that made it possible and for all these knowledges to emerge. And what I wanted to highlight was the fact that is not something that happens in a month. It is not something that happens in a year. It takes years and years and years. And those cases were only possible because of all the decades that came before it. And it's much more difficult to raise funding or get support for those years of non-sexy work that eventually culminates in the big case against Shell or whatever. But those things are only possible because of the many years of building these relationships and knowledge. And I just wanted to highlight that. And the second thing is the interesting thing that's happened with these cases, and we have Christian talking about the Searcher case and Visa about the Shell case. And with those cases that suddenly made these invisible fishes so visible, the country, environmentalists, surfers, beach bums from across the country suddenly loved the small-scale fishes because they also didn't want Shell in the ocean. But those same people, and sometimes those same scientists, are fighting against small-scale fishes in Isimangaliso. And in MPAs, and there's some sort of tension there.